Mhm. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Night with the Experts. This is a monthly program brought to you by the Nuclear Energy Information Service in Chicago, where we bring experts from all over the world, literally, to talk about various aspects of nuclear power and nuclear waste and sometimes nuclear weapons as well. Um, Nuclear Energy Information Service, I'm pleased to say, is turned 45 on June 7th of this year. So I guess you could either say that's an accomplishment or a great failure, wishing that we had won this issue a long time ago so we could put our attention to better things. But here we are, still fighting the good fight after all these 45 years. I also want to mention that this weekend for Nuclear Energy Information Service, we're having our annual meeting on Zoom for members only. So if you would like to become an NEIS member, you can go to our website and do so and join us on Sunday afternoon from 3 to 5 Central Time on Zoom. We have a program planned as well as some of the business stuff, but we'll fill you in on what will be the important issues in the coming year. So Night with the Experts has been going on, as I say, for almost 5 or 6 years now. We invert the usual format for webinars. We bring you experts who will talk about various topics, but we want to reserve most of the time for you, the participants, to interact with our experts. So we save the bulk of the evening for question and answer and for cross dialogue between yourselves and with our expert. So that's what sets us apart from most other online webinar type programs. Tonight, we have something rather unique and rather special. I would have to say we would call it physics with a flair compared to some of our other experts we've had in the past. We have Lynda Williams, who's joining us all the way from Hawaii. So we're really branching out on the Night with the Experts. We have people from England and Canada. Now we're heading west to Hawaii, and maybe in 2 months we'll be having someone from Japan as well. But I'll turn the meeting over now to my colleague and board member, Jan Boudart, who will introduce tonight's guest, Lynda Williams. Jan, take it away.
Oh, thank you very much. I don't want to give Lynda's formal bio because I met her in Window Rock, Arizona, and and so the question is, who put the fizz in physics? And of course, that's Lynda Lavon Williams. She is a generalist and yet a specialist. Her knowledge and ability with tech was on display in Window Rock. She put on a lovely show that was coordinated with slides perfectly, and I'm sure she worked that out herself. So she's great at tech. She's also an environmentalist in Hawaii and has written an article called SpaceX Wants to Increase Launches at Boca Chica Without a Full Environmental Review. And this was a published article. And she's also into understanding reprocessing of nuclear fuel, of used nuclear fuel. And let's see. Oh, one thing I definitely wanted to mention was she did a 5-part critique of the NRC that was stripping multiple physical security requirements for Category 1 and Category 2 radioactive sources. So you got to please appreciate her understanding of the technology. And this critique that she sent to the NRC was a comment that was just spectacular. So I hope that you will understand that our guest tonight is multi-talented: tech, the social aspects, the legal aspects, and everything that has to do with the issues that are driving us crazy. So I'm going to introduce Lynda Williams, and she'll also help introduce herself. So I'm turning it over to you, Lynda. Take yourself off mute.
Mahalo, aloha, everybody. Thank you for that introduction. Hi, Jackie. It's fun to see people's faces. I haven't seen you in so long. I'm going to share my, where is it? Here we go. And let me launch it. All righty. Can everybody see it okay? Someone's, okay, thank you, thank you. All right. Thank you for that introduction, Jan. I am a generalist, so here's a little bit of my background. I first was an anti-nuclear activist. I saw Helen Caldicott speak when I was in college, and this is during the 80s, during the height of the Cold War, nuclear madness, and she radicalized me. I was a journalist major, and I became so radicalized, I was like, I have to understand physics and nuclear physics. And even though I was voted most likely to be a dancer in Vegas in high school, it turned out that I was really good at physics and math. So I was able to get a bachelor's in applied math and a MS, a master's in physics. I was everything but the thesis for my PhD, but for family reasons, I had to withdraw. So I ended up teaching physics for over 20 years at Santa Rosa Junior College. My specialty is pedagogy, or how to communicate and teach physics, which works great with my entertainment and communication interests that I also have. I also taught for about 5 years at the San Francisco Art Institute, teaching video, media production, and also physics. So I have a unique background in both media, stage, theater, performance, and physics. Actually, I got my bachelor's in applied math with a minor in physics, and then went into production doing shows for years, and then wanted more knowledge. So I went back to get my PhD, so I could be a better informed activist and a better informed entertainer. So now I live in Hawaii, and I'm the founder of Nuclear Free Hawaiʻi. I live in Hilo on the island of Hawaii, the Big Island. And last year we became a nuclear free zone. So not only did the county approve that we cannot have any nuclear power here, we also do not invite the military to bring nuclear weapons here. So I retired from teaching here to Hawaii, and so I'm working as a science communicator, doing media production and some performance, and lately a lot of independent environmental journalism. So I think over the last 20 years or so, I created this character, the Physics Chanteuse, where I performed not only for the general public, but primarily for scientists and physicists. Because if anyone's in theater here and you do science theater or science communication, exposition or explaining the science so you can get to the entertainment is challenging. So I decided I would just cut through the red tape and start doing shows for scientists. And that was very exciting and got me my 2 minutes of a little bit of fame, but not enough to make a career out of it, hence teaching for 20 years. While I was teaching, I produced a lot of events. I love the planetarium. It's the happiest place on earth, if you ask me. So I produced many different science shows in the planetarium using music and multimedia, exploring different environmental themes, and interesting things like Polynesian wayfinding. I also produced a lot of events. My expertise actually is more in space. Missile defense, nuclear weapons, environmentalism in space. And yeah, so anyway, I've done a lot with that. And here's just some posters from some of the events I either produced or spoke at. And I mean, there's dozens. That's what's so great about being a professor at a community college, is that you have resources to produce events, and the more you can do for your community, the better. I've also been writing, so I write on space ecology, missile defense, nuclear weapons. Just here's some headlines from some of the articles I've written, and most recently I've been writing for Counterpunch, And you can see on the right, you can look up my name on Counterpunch and find all of my articles that I've written recently on the deregulation. So last year, because it was the 80th anniversary of the US bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki with nuclear weapons, I decided to do a show and take it on the road. I've always wanted to go to Edinburgh, which is the largest performance festival in the world. So I did a show called Atomic Cabaret. It's the science and madness of the bomb from Trinity to Trident. And I took it on tour. So I went to several different venues in the UK primarily, and also in Belgium and the Netherlands. Yeah, it was really, if anyone's an entertainer or a performer or interested in science communication, and you want to chat about this, I can stay longer, but taking a show based on nuclear weapons on the road is very challenging. It's important because you're exposing, I use that intentionally, you really are exposing a general public to these critical ideas in a theatrical way that is hopefully accessible. Although I had on several occasions audience members leaving in tears. And I just said to the audience, this is actually the appropriate response to this material. It's so heavy. So it's a challenge to try to figure out how to do the material without making your audience flee in tears. So I'm still working on that. So I ended up in November at the International Uranium Film Festival. And if you don't know about that, you should check it out. It's one of the best film festivals in the world, focusing on nuclear issues. NEIS hosts it in Chicago. They have their own version, yes, every year. So you can check it out if you're in Chicago. I attended the film festival in the Navajo Nation in Window Rock in November. I did a little performance there. And while I was there, I connected with so many environmental justice activists dealing with mining and milling, the 80 years of all of that contamination, long-term waste exposure, et cetera, water being poisoned, wells poisoned, disease, illness. Anyway, so I connected with many activists there and learned about this new project, which is in this article here. It's Navajo uranium waste could be a boon to U.S. energy needs. And what that was this company is called DISA, and they do this technology called HIPSA, which is high pressure ablation, slurry ablation. You can see in the right-hand corner there. And so essentially what they do is they go to an abandoned mine site, they collect all the rocks and waste that are left there, and they put it into a machine that just uses water, high pressure water. It breaks all the waste down into particles, and the uranium that's in the dirt and the rocks and the waste that was left behind in thousands of abandoned mines from the Cold War and from the first nuclear boom. You can see in the picture with the map there, all those red dots in the middle of the slide, those are abandoned uranium mines from the Cold War and the nuclear boom. And not just from the Cold War for weapons, they're also from the first phase of the nuclear power boom that happened. So anyway, they go to the site, they crush it all up. The uranium that's left in the dirt, that's just left there on the rocks, accumulates, gets concentrated, and they can extract it out. Then what's left behind is what's still radioactive dirt. It's not as radioactive. They've removed a lot of the uranium. However, the studies that they didn't prove that it didn't meet the level of what's considered like background radiation. So it's interesting, even though the study they did, which is shown in the upper right-hand corner there, that was done by Tetra Tech, a company that was convicted of falsifying data on reports in the past, they found that it did not meet the standards of the Navajo Nation for background radiation, but the NRC approved their license anyway and gave them a license for cleanup. Okay, and so what astounded me, I've read EISs and EAs doing nuclear work for weapons and also for SpaceX. I've read a lot of these reports. They're typically hundreds and hundreds of pages long. They refer to hundreds and hundreds and thousands of other pages, so they're very complicated and long. This was such a short EA. It was just an environmental assessment, the weaker form of the environmental review than a full EIS. And what was astounding was that, okay, you can see in the slide that they put out the EA in August. They had a 30-day public comment period. And then at the end of September, they released their finding of no significant impact, or a FONSI. That's the fastest turnaround I have ever seen in my many years of analyzing environmental review. So this blew my mind. I'm like, what the hell is happening that they can turn around a review so fast? And then they issued the license that same year. And it's a license that applies to 14 states. And you can see why they want 14 states, because look where all the abandoned uranium mines are. So anyway, they got the license as a form of cleanup, but then after they got the license, they reapplied to the NRC to change the mine waste into equivalent feed. Now, equivalent feed is something that actually can be sent to the mill in order to then go as yellow cake and get enriched to sell on the market for nuclear fuel. So they switched it. So rather than applying for extraction in order to sell it to the mill in order to make fuel, they try to attach it as like an amendment after the fact. So I've reported on this, and you can read about it if you go to Counterpunch and look at my articles. And this is still in the process of trying to be clear. So the company really screwed up. And so what they've done now, instead of trying to do to test it further on the Navajo Nation, they're just moved to Colorado, to the Marianne mine on BLM land, and they're applying for a permit to be able to test it there. So mind you, the DISA only tested like a couple kilograms of waste for 5 minutes. That's all they've done, and they got their license. So now the next thing is to take it to the next level. So the whole point of the story, so you can still pay attention to this because it's really interesting. And I think the long-term goal for this is they'll couple the DISA HIPSA extraction on the mine sites, so that first they'll extract with traditional means. Then the waste that's produced, they'll suck out every single last drop of uranium they can by using HIPSA. So it was always intended for extraction, not cleanup, but that's the ruse. And it's disgusting. Makes me want to puke, if you know what I mean. So that brings me to tonight's topic. And that's my background story about how I got to analyzing NRC and DOE rule changes. And I've decided I'm going to do a video podcast called Nuke Puke, because all this makes me want to puke. And that's me. And nukepuke.com. You can go check that out later when I get to that. Before I start this presentation, I want to thank all these people here. I should put Jackie Cabasso on this list because I wouldn't even be here without her. There's too many people to name, but the fact of the matter is that doing this work requires community, and the anti-nuclear community is just so amazing. There's so many people who have different areas of expertise that are generously offering their information and knowledge. And there's so many more people than this, but this is just a quick shout out. I couldn't have done any of this work without y'all. All right, ready? Okay, so the deregulation we're experiencing now through the DOE and the NRC didn't start with Trump, it started with Biden, with the ADVANCE Act. And the ADVANCE Act of 2024, it's bipartisan. What it does, it changes the NRC mission to support nuclear deployment. So you might know in the old days there was the AEC, but that was shut down and the NRC was created because of they having a conflict of interest by promoting the industry they were supposed to regulate. So now the ADVANCE Act tells the NRC to actually support the deployment. It's kind of like the IAEA, which, if you know, in the United Nations, their business is to be the global pimp of nuclear power. So now the NRC is the American pimp of nuclear power. So accelerate reactor licensing, reduce barriers, encourage siting, not only at coal plants, but now, as we're going to see, Cold War era Superfund sites are being eyed for enrichment, reprocessing, and probably AI data centers powered by nuclear power. So what's shocking to me is that I just found out is that Sheldon Whitehouse, who's supposed to be a great, hero of the environment, a Democrat from Rhode Island, sponsored this bill. So as well as Tom Carper and then Capito, a Republican, not surprising. But look how it passed. It overwhelmingly passed in both the House and the Senate. And the only two senators who voted against it were Bernie Sanders and Ed Markey. Clearly allies. We have 2 allies out of 50 in the Senate. So, and then recently, you might have read in the Capitol Hill Citizen, they reported that there's a huge conflict of interest, not only with Sheldon Whitehouse, but also Cory Booker, because he holds NVIDIA stock, and NVIDIA is the chip maker for the AI data centers, right? And also in Google, Amazon, and Meta. All of these companies are getting in bed with either startup nuclear companies like Oklo, which is Sam Altman's company, or Google, Amazon, and Meta, who are also financing nuclear expansion for their data centers. So there's a huge conflict of interest, which is worth noting. So that was disappointing. So this Advance Act is motivating the change. Then we have Trump's second term and the nuclear executive orders. So this is deregulation on steroids. And they base a lot of these, like, to come into compliance with the Advance Act, we're going to do all these executive orders. So, okay, I'm doing a data dump on you. Like, I'm barfing on you right now, everybody. So I hope you can take it. And we'll give you the slides. So you'll have all of this. You can come back to it because I'm going to be going over pretty fast. So there's 6 different executive orders that are related to nuclear reactors. So you can kind of look at them here that he did in the first year. And he's ordering 100% reform of the NRC, wholesale revision of NRC safety rules. They're supposed to be all done November 2026, so I can retire from doing this. They are trying to make it easier for advanced reactors, small modular reactors, micro reactors, but the changes they're making are actually applied to all reactors. So that's kind of a Trojan horse. We're going to say, oh, advanced reactors are so much better and so much more safer than the traditional large light water reactors, but the laws that they're changing apply to everything. So it's definitely a kind of Trojan horse. And I feel like Cassandra, and if you know who Cassandra is, she was the gal everyone thought was crazy, who's always screaming, there's soldiers on the horse, and nobody paid attention. Okay. All right. So then Executive Order 14318, it's the AI nuclear connection, which is what I'm building towards, which is the techno-fascists are going to power their surveillance AI takeover of democracy. I mean, essentially, that's kind of what I'm headed towards. And all of these executive orders are empowering that. So this executive order applies to AI data centers with 100 megawatts of new load and large investment. It targets the typical, big media companies, fast tracks federal permitting for AI data centers, and now starts talking about nukes. So it defines nuclear power equipment as covered components. That's critical infrastructure. So that has expedited permitting and federal incentives, as we're going to see. It prioritizes all the infrastructure for nuclear, and it also revokes Biden's AI infrastructure order, stripping it of environmental safeguards. So yeah, an example of that is in Utah, they're going to build an AI data center at Camp Williams in Utah and power it with microreactors or SMRs from Valor Atomics. Okay, and then there's more. So So here's the AI connection. So then Executive Order 14318 fast tracks federal permitting again. Oh, that's a repeat of the last one. Sorry, I have a repetition. And then here's the new one on the bottom, which is 14363. That's the Genesis mission. That's not for recreating life. That is for AI to be used to accelerate fusion, advanced nuclear, science, etc. Fusion power. Yeah, it's the power of the future, and it always will be. So what happens? So now Trump makes all these executive orders. So what happens? Well, the federal agencies that are part of the executive branch need to respond, and they have timelines to respond, and it's very fast. So if you're a nuclear activist and you've been watching all this come down in the last year, it's like it's an avalanche because they're being pushed and pressured for these kind of arbitrary deadlines. It's to get it done before Trump's voted out of office, in my opinion. So what are the agencies involved? NRC, DOE, DOD, EPA, CEQ. CEQ is really important because that's the Council on Environmental Quality. That exists in the executive branch, and that's the board or the council that oversees the implementation of NEPA, or the Environmental Protection Act. That's the main law that's used for environmental protections. And they just gutted CEQ. I don't even think they have populated the council. So it's just impotent now. Anyway, so they have to make rules that abide by the executive orders, and they make a proposal. They publish it in the Federal Register, which is publicly available for everybody. And then they typically hold public comment periods. Sometimes it's 30 days, sometimes it's 45 days. And then typically that takes like a year or a while to review till they come out with their final rule. But now they're coming out with their final rule first. I mean, for a lot of these rules, they're publishing the rule the day they're opening for comments. I mean, it's just absolutely insane. And yeah, so that's typically the process. And commenting is very, very important for many reasons. One, it becomes part of the record. And most importantly is if anyone's going to challenge or sue, bring the agency to court about the rule that, say, perhaps it violates the Clean Water Act or something, it has to be established in the comment period. So that's why, like, you can go to the Federal Register or where the docket is for the rule, and you can read everybody's comments. That's what I do. That's a huge source of information. And you can see like the legalese. It's some people are publishing very technical documents and comments so that they can be used to challenge in court at a later time. And that is the legal process for challenging these rules. There's also many rules that are being changed with no comment period now. And we'll talk about some of those. The NEPA rollback is another very terrifying executive order because it's trying to expedite NEPA review, which means like it has to be done in a certain amount of time. It limits the number of pages. The Advance Act limits the number of pages in a review. It requests more categorical exclusions. A categorical exclusion, which I can hardly say in my mouth because I want to puke right now, is there are different things that are classified already as not having to need an environmental review. So in the past, the categorical exclusion could have been something pretty innocuous, like building a bridge or building not a big bridge, but building small things that don't have a large environmental impact. Now they are creating categorical exclusions for entire reactor classes. So no environmental review whatsoever because micro and SMRs are so safe, they don't need environmental review. That is the argument that they're making, which is insane because no matter the size or the type, they all use fission and they all produce radioactive waste. You can never recycle away. Anyway, so that NEPA rollback is really dangerous because that's overall. That's not just for nukes. That's for water and air and everything. And I'll talk about this at the end. The SPEED Act is a piece of legislation that has passed the House and is in the Senate right now. It's very dangerous. I've written about it, and I'm totally a Cassandra about the SPEED Act because nobody's paying attention much. But the SPEED Act will codify this executive order, meaning it can't be overturned by the next incoming administration. So an executive order is only good during the administration that proposed it, if the next administration wants to come in and repeal it. But the SPEED Act would make this executive order permanent law. And I'll talk about it more later. I mean, it's really horrible. It makes me want to barf. Okay, so now let's talk about, we're going to do the DOE and the NRC, and then we'll talk about the techno-fascists. So the Department of Energy, if you didn't know, it's the federal executive branch. It shouldn't be called the Department of Energy. It should be called the Department of Nuclear Power. I mean, that's, or the Department of Fools, the DOF. So it owns the former weapon sites that during the Cold War. It owns the materials. And I checked that word own, and it owns the money. It owns the waste produced, which is now being considered feedstock. It owns the plutonium pits. It's also overseen by the NNSA. It's complicated, but the DOE has so much power. It is currently governed by Chris Wright, a fracking executive with Liberty Energy. So he's a fracker, he's an oil guy, and he was on the OCLO board. So OCLO, if you didn't know, that's Sam Altman on the bottom. It's his company. He started it. He was the chair of the board. He recently stepped down in order to not make it seem like he had a conflict of interest because he's pushing hard for AI being powered by nuclear power. So he's no longer the board member, but he still is a major share owner, and for sure. So Chris Wright apparently divested from OCLO, but you know how that swinging door, the revolving door goes, right? You have people from industry going into government, and then after the government, they go back into industry. And I always say, don't let that revolving door slap you in the backside on your way out. They need to close that revolving door. If you serve as the Department of Energy, you don't get to go back to the company. It's just it's insane. So more about OCLO in a while, but that's he's definitely got a conflict of interest. So the DOE owns Paducah, Portsmouth, Piketon, Oak Ridge, Hanford, Savannah River. These are all very large Superfund, meaning they're totally polluted. It's going to cost millions, if not billions of dollars to clean them up. And they're all part of the Cold War effort to make plutonium and enrich uranium. So for plutonium, you have to breed it, right? Plutonium does not exist in nature. You have to breed it. So it was a huge, ugly mess, and they just kind of left it. And the DOE is supposed to clean it up, but they're doing a terrible job. So now they're just turning them into sacrifice zones for these startup nuclear companies to come in and, do their own business. All right. So what kind of deregulation has the DOE been doing under these executive orders? Well, they rewrote reactor safety rules in secret. NPR reported on this recently. It stripped ALARA. ALARA is a safety that requires nuclear companies to make sure they're doing everything they can to reduce the risk. And they just stripped it. So that's gone. And that's NRC is now looking about stripping that as well. I'll get to that in a little bit. So it rewrote so they don't care about groundwater protections. They never published the rewriting of the safety. It was shared by NPR, I think, doing a FOIA. So again, they eliminated ALARA, no public comment on any of it, gutted NEPA, moved environmental review into a guidance. All right, took effect immediately, comment only afterwards. It created categorical exclusions for advanced reactors. That's for siting, construction, operation, exempt from all environmental review as long as those reactors are operating on DOE properties. And then recently, it just did the zero-based regulation where it sunsets 28 regulations, 22 related to nuclear materials. And it's all at the discretion. So in this case, for zero-based regulating. They're like, we're going to sunset all these rules that are everything from, safety for managing these, spent fuel or the feedstocks to like testing workers for drugs and alcohol. So, I mean, it's like this wide range of different regulations, and it's all up to Chris Wright. And the only way that he won't do it is if they got enough comments submitted by, I think it was last week or this week, to submit comments. Like it wasn't, it's just, yeah, he's a dictator. So what are the giveaways? Well, they launched the reactor pilot program. So they said 11 advanced reactor projects, 10 different companies could be tested on DOE land, mostly at the Idaho National Laboratory and other federal sites. No review, no licensing. They have to do a safety, but it's like up to them to decide what their safety has to be. Here's some of the companies that were permitted to do that. They're giving 20 metric tons of weapons-grade plutonium away to 5 companies. Here's the companies. Oklo is one of them. Oklo, see Oklo everywhere. Oklo is the recipient of all of these giveaways. General Matter is a company that Peter Thiel started, and that's an enrichment company, and he wants to make highly enriched nuclear fuel, or HALEU. I don't know how you say that. HALEU fuel. He got $900 million for that. And then the Paducah land lease goes to General Matter for enriching, and they're guaranteed 7,600 cylinders of UF6, which is waste from the previous enrichment. And it has a value of like $12 to $15 billion. So we don't know what the deal is, if they have to pay for it or they're just transferring it to them. Those details have not been fleshed out yet. Now, what's interesting about the plutonium is that I did a quick estimate. This is the way I calculated it. I think that the value of the plutonium giveaway is $200 to $400 billion. Why? Because if you're going to reproduce the plutonium pits they're giving away, that's the estimated cost today. In fact, that's exactly what the government's doing. They're getting rid of their storage or their plutonium that they have for pits, or they're giving away the pits they have on the shelf or whatever, and they're making new pits. And that's a whole nother issue for someone to come and talk about someday, is they're making new pits. So at the cost right now to make 20 metric tons of plutonium, it's about $200 to $400 billion. There's no market value because you're not allowed to sell plutonium on the open market because of proliferation with nuclear weapons risk. So this is my little estimate that I made just based on today's cost. The U.S. is going to spend 5.5. Oh, no, yeah. So just in sum, the U.S. has already spent in the last 80 years, $5.5 trillion on its nuclear weapons. Now, it seems like, God, it almost sounds like that's the new 1,000, right? We're just, we have a trillionaire now. It's crazy. So I know this is a lot of material, but it's a lot. This is all in the last year. I think one of the most heinous things that they're talking about is the nuclear life cycle, as if it's a life cycle. So the nuclear cycle is not a life cycle. It's a death cycle. It's a waste cycle. It's a radioactive cycle, and they're calling it a life cycle. And that's implying that they're going to be able to reprocess or recycle the waste away, which is physically impossible. So what they did is they put out a request for information to all the states in the country to put on one site every part of the cycle except mining. So it would be fabrication, it could be enrichment, fabrication, the nuclear power plants, you could have the AI data center, and then you'd have the spent fuel there, and then if you can reprocess or recycle it, and it goes back in a loop. So that's what they're calling this life cycle campus. And apparently 16 states, or there's many states. How many states do we have? So there's 5 first mover states that have, said they want to do it. Utah for sure. Governor Cox in Utah is all in. And this is what I made this using AI. I So don't shame me. I will use AI to take down AI. Because this is a visualization. What I did with AI is I fed in their proposal. And I just said, okay, and it took a long, long, long time to make this image. So I fed it into AI and I said, okay, break it down, tell me all the parts. And then we constructed this based on their own proposal. And this is the campus. So they have everything. Here's Salt Lake City. This is when it's up and running, if it ever were, it would use 25 million gallons of water a day. And this, I don't know if in this image, there's the AI data centers. It's kind of low res, sorry about that. But it just gives you the expanse. Like they want to put these in every state. The state has to agree for long-term spent fuel storage on site or in their state. So if they want to get the funding or they want to get the permission or they want to get approval to do this, they have to agree to keep the spent fuel. So instead of having the one geological repository in Shoshone, Yucca Mountain, they're just going to puke it all over the country. That's the plan. And so recently they had this gigawatt nuclear conference and all the big wigs in the government and all the big wigs in the nuclear industry went to Utah for this gigawatt industry summit. And Lee Zeldin, the worst EPA administrator in the history of the world, he never saw an environmental protection he wanted to destroy, didn't want to destroy. He said, this is the moment to step on the gas, to invest, to believe in your company, to believe in your vision, and to try to get as much built as possible before the end of this term, meaning the Trump term, because they know he's going. So they're just building fast, deploying fast, furious, so that, it's all, the inertia is going before the new administration comes in. And sadly, the Democrats seem to be as, duped by these false promises of the industry. So that's not all, folks. The DOE also just promised $17.5 billion in loans for 10 large reactors. The 10 reactors were part of the EO executive order that they would have that. And it's Westinghouse. So these are large light water reactors. These are not advanced reactors or small modular reactors. And these loans are for components. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get companies to sign contracts with Westinghouse because there aren't any contracts yet to build these things. So in a nutshell, they're trying to incentivize. They said, we'll give you these loans to buy the parts, to start building it even before you have a license as an incentive. So Ed Lyman, of course, our hero at the Union of Concerned Scientists, said about it. I have to move my little bar here. That this money is a drop in the bucket because the true cost would be more like $200 billion. So DOE is in bed with nuclear AI. They're in both ways. They have AI, working on the research end and the writing end, and then also the operation end. So, for example, at Los Alamos, where the Manhattan Project was, that developed the first nuclear weapons, Oklo and NVIDIA have been testing they haven't been testing the Pluto reactor, Pluto for plutonium. That's a plutonium, that's a reactor that's run on plutonium, but they've been testing it at Los Alamos, and then now they're starting to build it. So it's no surprise that Chris Wright, previous guy of Oklo, is giving Oklo the plutonium for their plutonium reactor. It's so corrupt. They're also working on fusion and AI writing NRC applications. So the DOE is using AI to write NRC license applications for these private companies. And then the Idaho National Lab, that's where many of the advanced reactors are being cited for this fake July 4th deadline that we'll never know was reached or not. That, these companies are supposed to reach criticality by July 4th, right? Totally arbitrary. It's part of the 250th Trump, mania. But no one will ever know if it really happened or not because there's no independent observers. So one of the projects, the most disgusting project I think besides nuclear weapons I've ever heard, is this deep fission project y'all might have heard of. This is in Kansas. And the idea is to put a microreactor a mile in the ground, let it run, and then just put another one on top. and so on and so on. And so what happened, I guess the company found out like people in Kansas don't like that idea. And so they said, oh, we're not going to do this berry on top like this. We'll extract the spent fuel and store it. And then, so it's all bullshit. But this to me is such a violation of Mother Earth, like just digging right into her and putting in the reactor and letting it rot there forever. So there's just so much happening. It's hard to handle it with not wanting to barf. And I feel like puking right now. So that's just the DOE. Then we have the NRC. So the NRC is supposed to be this independent federal agency that works for us. Okay. They updated their mission. So they are now directed to weigh the benefits of nuclear along safety. So it's no longer safety first. It used to be safety first and no public comment. Streamlining hearing processes. So this is super shocking. It's one of these subtle things that may not be on your radar, but it's like, what? So if they're proposing something, then you can require a hearing. So say, for example, like right now, they're proposing giving a license to a company that wants to start up a uranium mine in Indian country. And so like they say, well, you have, 2 weeks or a month to request a hearing for parties who might be impacted. So now what they're doing is they're compressing the hearings, and they often make you request the hearing before they've even released the EIS, the environmental review. So they're completely messing with that democratic process of being able to ask for a hearing to challenge the project. So now we're going to go over a few of these in more detail. Part 53 it's a risk-informed, technology-inclusive regulatory framework for commercial reactors. So what this means is the companies can decide what the risk is and then do their own analysis. I'm not kidding. That's what it is. New Reg 2249, nobody's radar has been on this. And the new Reg 2249 is mind-blowing. I'm going to talk about that more in detail in a minute. It's a generic environmental impact statement for advanced reactors that takes 122 environmental issues and just says categorical exclusion. Doesn't have to be analyzed because it's a small reactor. And then Part 51 is more categorical exclusions. Really shocking is the NRC reviews of reactor designs previously authorized by the DOE or the DOW. So what that means is, like, for example, those reactors being tested right now for the July 4th criticality test at Idaho, these private companies, they got a safety, authorization. And so what they're saying is then after they test it and they want to build a commercial reactor and deploy it, and they have to get an NRC license. Now they're saying, oh, they can just, instead of doing an NRC safety review, they can just use the one from the DOE. And that's astonishing because the safety for the DOE was for doing it in Idaho. What you need to do is do a site-specific environmental review wherever they're going to deploy it. So they're just cutting all that. No more site-specific, and worse, no more cumulative impact. Part 57 is lining up deploying multiple microreactors for AI, and I'll talk to you that in a moment. And then now what's yet to come is the radiation or ALARA rollback, and we're waiting for that to happen. So Part 53, this is the risk-informed, inclusive, whatever. So it replaces prescriptive safety rules with performance criteria that the applicant designs to meet. So in other words, they could say like, well, if we run it this hot and it doesn't melt down, that's our safety rule or whatever. So it's generic like that. There's flexible siting. It allows reactors in higher populated areas, including centers over 25,000 people. So these are populated areas. I mean, the dream, I guess, is to drop a microreactor in every community. I don't know. That's what they're building up for, etc. Again, if you want, you can get these slides so you can go over it in more detail because I got to kind of stick to time here. Here's the new Reg 2249. So this is the one that blew my mind. I came across new Reg 2249 when I was reading the draft environmental impact study the DOE put out for a laser silex enrichment plant at Paducah. And what it is, it's 122 environmental questions about a reactor. So it's 100 are pre-declared small. There's no site-specific review, no water or sedimentation or any of that. It's like all just like, no problem. It's rubber stamping. This is the rubber stamping for 122 environmental issues that would normally require hundreds and hundreds of pages of analysis, which you have to do at every site because every site is different, right? And they're just eliminating that. All sites are the same. And so what was weird was they used New Reg 2249 for the enrichment plant, but New Reg 2249 is for reactors. So I hope that's reason enough. I don't know. I mean, that's crazy. Like, why would you use a reactor rule for enrichment? And I think what's happening, and this is what other people think as well, these changes are happening so fast that whoever's left at the NRC is really struggling. And a lot of people left, like 500 people either were removed by DOGE or resigned and retired or whatever. So the NRC is strapped. Part 57. This is the one that comments were just due. This one is mind-blowing. All right, so this is an AI poster I made. Yes, I used AI, whatever. So here's microreactors. This is the vision deployed for an AI data center. Because what Part 57 does is you do an application for a license for one microreactor, and then you can put as many as you want, okay? And no cumulative impact. So how, what is the impact for all these multiple reactors themselves? So that changes the situation. There's definitely going to be different about more water, more energy, more waste, etc. So it doesn't even make any sense. Why would you allow a company to get one license for one microreactor that might be a megawatt, but then say, okay, now you can have 100 megawatts, 100 of those reactors for 100 megawatts, right? It also is a way to divert from the Price-Anderson Act because it has a limit on like who has to pay into the fund and based on the gigawatts. In fact, Part 57 no longer uses wattage, megawatts of electricity generated to classify a reactor. Instead, they use, I don't even understand it. It's something like the company can decide, like in the event of some kind of accident, what would be the dose at the border, the boundary of the plant. And so I guess it'd be like a 1 rem reactor or a 10 rem or whatever, a millirem reactor. So it's like rewriting the classification of reactors based on the company's own, their own voluntary analysis or prediction of in the event of a fantasy accident, what would be the dose at the bound. I mean, it's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. So no resident inspectors. So no NRC inspectors. That usually at a big reactor, there's like full-time NRC inspectors to make sure everything's going well. No operators. So it'll be all these reactors will be run by AI. Autonomous operation. What could go wrong? No more safety plans required. I mean, it's a really big bill and rule. And these are just the highlights of it that are insane. So for example, like it's important to, if you're an activist and you're writing letters, it's good to be able to reference these rule changes because, for example, with ALARA or radiation risk, with these weakened rules, that will impact the potential dangers of like being exposed to radiation. And that's the what's up next. So that I can see, and maybe folks here know what else is on coming down the pipe. So the NRC is going to eliminate the ALARA as low as reasonably achievable. So they're supposed to have an ethic of we're going to only expose our workers and the communities in which our reactors are based as low as reasonably achievable, ALARA principle. And they're just going to eliminate it like the DOE did. This is coming up. People say July 2nd. There was a fantastic talk today, webinar given by the Generational Radiation Impact Project and Stop Radioactive Pollution, Protect Better. So you can look these up and follow them to see when the deadlines are due for comments. So comments should be coming up. And again, do they read the comments? Do they care? It doesn't matter. That's the legal process to make a precedent, to get on the record, to challenge these rules. Almost done. I don't know how long I've been going forever. Let me look at my thing. Oh my God, almost an hour. I'm almost done. Okay. So we'll have a half an hour for Q&A. I'm sorry I've gone long. It's just a lot of information, isn't it? It's crazy. States are also changing the rules. So this is really sad. There were 16 states that had moratoriums. Hawaii has a moratorium. And some are now repealing them and expanding nuclear. Luckily in Hawaii, we were able to stop that for now. The DOD is also into it. They have a project called the Pele Project, which I think they're going to be cursed forever naming it that. That's the goddess of, volcano. And so in the 2027 National Defense Authorization Act, that's the Pentagon budget, there was an amendment that requires microreactors to be deployed by 2030. And here's a visualization I made of what it would look at Puakaloa, which is the Army testing base right behind where I live. And so what they claim, like, oh, a reactor just comes in a container and they take it out and they plug it in the grid. That is not true. They have to build a platform. Look at the structure there. This is based on their EIS. So again, I take the EIS, I feed it into the environmental statement, and put it into ChatGPT. You talk about it, you extract what you want, and then this is based on their own EIS. So it's not like get the reactor off of a semi and plug it into the grid. You have to build this entire structure. It's radioactive afterwards. It has to be dismantled, decommissioned. There's nowhere to put the spent fuel. It doesn't matter how big it is. Or if it's 1 megawatt or 100 megawatts, there is no plug and chug. There's no plug and play reactors, my friends. Doesn't it make you want to barf? It makes me want to barf. All right, so the techno-fascists are getting in the game, and I'm working. This is my newest article I'm working on. It's really heavy. It makes me really sick to my stomach. The main players are Sam Altman, because he started Oklo, and then of course the demon Antichrist guy, Peter Thiel. He started General Matter, and that's an enrichment company. Altman starts Oklo, or is one of the founders of Oklo. That's reactors, plutonium reactor, and also uranium reactor, and then reprocessing. So they're going to get into the reprocessing side. And then Meta, Oracle, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they all have contracts to get the reactors to power the AI data centers. Here's the thing. They're not getting micro and SMRs reactors for the grid for us. They're going to be off-grid, right? They'll be off-grid, dedicated because of Part 57, right, for their AI data centers. It has nothing to do with us because, as Michael Jackson said, they don't care about it. In their own words, you've seen it before. Peter Thiel, I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible. Alex Karp released his 22-point manifesto. The question is not whether AI weapons will be built, it is who will build them and for what purpose. All of these companies are deep into the military for surveillance and targeting. Palmer Luckey, he's a creepy guy. He's a lead investor in Velara Atomics. You need people like me who are sick in that way and who lose any sleep making tools of violence in order to preserve freedom. What is wrong with these people? Mark Andreessen, the guy with the really pointy head, he has no introspection. And he's also, these are all funds, right? A16Z is a fund, an investment fund that invests in these companies. Larry Ellison, citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on. So when you say, like, why do we need those giant hyper data centers? It's to store and analyze all the data they're collecting on us, right? It isn't to make an image or do a Google search because AI is being integrated into everything we're using on media that it's hard to avoid it. So I'm not going to demonize anybody for making an image, but I will demonize people for wanting to overthrow democracy so they can take over the world. Again, General Matter, I've talked about it. And the rest of the cartel, so there's just, I'm calling it the nuclear cartel. They're all in it and so on. Again, this is Rule 57. It really does pave the way for multiple reactors off the grid just to power AI data centers for the techno-fascist surveillance state. I'm almost done, you guys. I could really use a cocktail after this. So the Speed Act, please put it on your radar. I wrote about it I don't know if anyone read it, but I wrote about it on Counterpunch. That is Senator Whitehouse and Heinrich. So Whitehouse is Rhode Island, and Heinrich is New Mexico. They sit on the committee that's keeping it, is not releasing it yet. They're negotiating it because they want to deploy solar and wind. The problem with the Speed Act is that it codifies those executive orders that gut NEPA review permanently. So even though like they may want to pass, my Senator Schatz is for it as long as they improve the grid, because he wants to deploy solar and wind faster, right? But the problem is that's why it's the Pandora's box. If you weaken environmental review so you can deploy wind and solar, you're also going to weaken the environmental review for nuclear. So it can't be released as it's written right now. In fact, they should just kill it. So it's really important to get on this. It probably won't happen before the fall elections, but who knows? This is a crazy time right now. How's everybody doing, y'all? I think that I'm done. I'm just gonna sing a song now. Because I've gone, oh my gosh, I've gone an hour. I meant to go 40 minutes, so my apologies. So let's end with a little bit of a song that I wrote for the fabulous Alan Robach, my hero. You may have heard of him. He's a climate scientist, and he's the world's leading expert, along with Brian Toon, on nuclear winter. And so this is a song I wrote for him. He told me, he's hired me a lot to do climate shows. I have a lot of climate songs. I've done a lot of shows on climate. And so we were talking, and he said, nuclear winter is a self-assured suicide. You bomb your enemy and you end up killing everything alive. I was like, damn girl, that's a song. So and this is his new book everyone should check out, Earth in Flames. So here's a little song. I'm just going to play a little bit, and then I have one more little song to sing, and then we'll...
You want to hear her song on nuclear winter?
Yeah. Here we go.
Right.
Can you hear it? You guys hear it?
Yes.
Thank you. Nuke bombs drop down, cities burn. The smoke goes up and up into the stratosphere. Smoke spreads and envelops Earth, blocking sunlight. The surface cools, goes dark and dry. Scientifically accurate, by the way. Killing plants worldwide and killing off our food supply. Nuclear winter is a self-assured suicide. You bomb your enemy and end up killing everything alive. Okay, so if you're interested, you can hear the rest of that on my YouTube channel. And it's funny because I submitted the lyrics to Alan, and he made me change words. He was like, we want to make this absolutely accurate. So now he plays my song when he does talks about nuclear winter. So if there's anyone out there that needs a song, let me know. So I'm gonna close with this. Oh, sorry. I'm gonna close with this. So I'm a physicist and I love physics. I got into physics because I was an anti-nuclear activist, but then I fell in love with it because it's such a great tool for understanding the universe and the cosmos, and I'm in love with the universe. The problem is that it's missing, it's not a unified theory, and it's missing a force. But I think I have found that force, and I'm going to share it with you right now. The standard model of physics has 4 forces in it: the strong, the weak, and gravity, and the electromagnetic. But I have discovered a new force that unifies us all. Let me propose to you, wait a minute. Let me go back and start at the beginning. quantum from over, 19 forks into atoms like I am bound to do. Physics are weak, they make particles decay, and atoms ready to go black. That's how I go in your way. Photons mediate EMF, particle and wave. Don't get and concentrate. Both mass and energy, they make the world go round and round. That's what you do to me.
That's like at the cabaret.
I have found the buzz on that mediates the force of love. But you can measure it. Hey, you can only feel it pulling on the super strings of your heart. We should add it to the colors of a bar. Suppose that unified soul in a unified
One of the orgs I
Love on.
signed
Hey,
up
Steve.
some time ago.
Steve, don't talk, Steve. That's the love on. Love on, everybody. Thank you so much. That's my talk.
Well, round of applause, people. We've never had a cabaret on Night with the Experts before, but I guess there's always a first for everything. Thank you very much, Lynda. So that was a dump, as you said. Now you're really going to have to pay for it because I'm sure folks are going to have a lot of questions, a lot of reactions. Just a few reminders for people before we get started. This event is recorded, and we're going to be moving into the next phase of the evening where you have an opportunity to ask questions, enter into dialogue. If you do not want to appear on either on the audio or video portion of this, make sure you turn off your cameras and you can also use the chat to put comments in, but we prefer, as you'll hear in a minute, that you use the raise hand method so we can keep track of who wants to talk to our guest speaker. On that note, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jan, who will be conducting the next part of the evening. And if you don't mind, Lynda, we may go a little bit past the half hour and see how you're holding up. So
I'll stay as long as you want me.
all right, Jan, back to you.
Oh, thank you very much, Dave. I I guess as you realize, Lynda is a very wide-ranging person, and her intellectual achievements are enormous. She has given us an overview of a great many things tonight, and we need to look at those things, pick and choose, and keep in mind that you yourself are capable of making comments on these and putting your name in to the NRC or the DOE that you care and that you do understand. So we're going, here's how the Q&A works. You may ask one question and one follow-up. If you want to make a comment, I try to time you to keep your comment to about 3 minutes if you're not going to ask a question. You can go to the bottom of your screen where it says react. And if you click there, there will be a bar that says raise hand. That's what Connie just did. So she did that at the bottom of the screen. If you don't want to do it that way, the second way is to put into the chat stack, S-T-A-C-K, and I'll put you on the stack if we find you in time. David and I will be watching the chat to make sure that we pick up people who have written stack. Another way is to raise your hand like that, and the point is we try to keep everybody happy that they can ask their question, and we try to keep you in order. So we'll do our best. And are there any questions about the rules? Okay, that's how we say it in Chicago, the rules. Okay, Connie, you go ahead and ask your question.
It was so entertaining. Two things. One just a procedural one. Will the slides be released when the recording is available?
How's that going to work, Dave?
I'm not to
Oh.
release them, so I'll give them to you, Jan, and you send it out with the. Oh, I got my
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
That's perfect.
Just send it to me and Dave. Yeah.
Okay.
Then, I know you, presented information on what the DOE has done to NEPA, but the NRC also has, and maybe this was part of it, maybe I'm confused, but the NRC also, I think it was on, what's the date today? I think it was on June 23rd, a couple of days ago, that the NRC published their Federal Register notice on NEPA review. I must admit I haven't looked at it. I haven't commented on it. I think that's the correct date. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I think the comment period ends on July 17th. And for those who weren't in that fantastic meeting that Grip and others put on this afternoon, the Federal Register notice on weakening radiation standards will come out, it's supposed to come out July 2nd. And I can't remember when that comment deadline is, but it's 30 days. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Connie. We do have to watch for our opportunity to make comments. And if you do get a chance, Lynda and I both have the habit of going into the NRC and reading the comments. It's grueling, but it's very, very interesting. And your comments will be there for a long time if you decide to make a comment. Oh, but Lynda, do you have something to say about Connie's comment?
All I heard is what I heard today. I was in the same fantastic meeting that is supposed to come out on July 2nd on the Federal Register, and then from that point it'll be 30 days, I think. And that's my birthday, so.
Which is your birthday?
July 2nd.
Ah, not far. It's soon.
Yes.
Does anybody else want to make a comment or ask a question? I think we're kind of overwhelmed.
Y'all have a
Jackie.
collective barf.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a icon for it. Okay, Jackie, you're next.
Yeah. I was getting all prepared to write comments. I thought that they were due tomorrow, Lynda.
For part 57?
Yeah, I thought there was something that I was supposed to be writing that was due for tomorrow. No?
No. But yeah, no, 57 I think was Monday. And honestly, like I just have to, one thing I just, I struggle. I mean, I'm smart, okay, but I'm not good at memorizing things. If I could memorize things, I would be a biologist, not a physicist. But so I get overwhelmed, like as far as like I have to look everything up just to, I'm confessing my limitations because yeah, I'm smart, but I'm not a super genius. So this is accessible to people. It's just about spending the time. But I always struggle. Like you're saying, was it due tomorrow? And I'm like, well, I don't know what it's due tomorrow, so I have to look it up. But I'm fairly confident that the deadline was Monday.
So what would be the next thing to be commenting on aside from the Alara and LNT?
I don't.
Is there anything else?
Okay, the DOE zero regulation, that is something you can comment on.
Okay.
And that you can Google zero regulation DOE, it will come up. It doesn't say public comments are due. What it says embedded in it, the secretary will decide whether or not to sunset a rule based upon if there's enough comments or not. And I've never seen that before.
So we all have to comment on that. That's
so yeah, I mean.
Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, now in the stack we have Alfred and then Jake, and anybody else if you wish to raise your hand. So we'll start out now with Alfred. Go ahead.
Well, Lynda, I'd like to thank you so much for tremendous production. I would suggest that you've put the humanity back into a very inhumane topic and done it with spirit and energy and enthusiasm. And I look forward to reviewing your slides that have such a comprehensive review of what's, the fire hose that's being aimed at us currently. I'd like to just suggest that it's the military prerogative that's driving the nuclear enterprise. And when I looked up the word prerogative, it's defined as the exclusive right bestowed by a government separate from the body of rights enjoyed under the general law. And it's my opinion that it's the military, the nuclear weapons, and the nuclear navy that are driving this whole nuclear enterprise. Civilian nuclear power is the cover story. It's to sell it to the gullible public, too cheap to meter. Remember that one? Or it's going to solve climate change, or it's clean energy, but it doesn't matter that we have the plutonium pits in storage that are good for another 100 years. We need the academic, industrial, and governmental infrastructure to make new nuclear weapons and the nuclear navy with which to deliver them. And the intent of the current bipartisan administration, because I do believe it's a bipartisan effort, is to make nuclear appear inevitable. And I just wanted to add, thank you so much for the information you got. The protectbetter.org is the website to get hooked up with this wonderful effort, which I hope can really change the direction that we seem to be headed in. But just thanks once again for such a tremendous production for us.
Thank you, Alfred. I just want to comment that I think you're right. The normalization of small modular advanced reactors, microreactors, it's a con job. And I follow the agencies a lot on Twitter. Twitter is their platform, and they just lie. They straight up say that you can recycle. Now they're saying recycle instead of reprocess.
Yeah.
You can recycle all of the waste away and make the storing only a few hundred years instead of 10,000s of years. And I mean, they're lying. They lie all the time. They normalize it. Oh, these are new reactors. These aren't your grandma's reactors. These are clean and, and I think that the Pele project I showed you where they want to deploy them in the battlefield, right? They're going to test it in Hawaii, drop in the reactor, build it. So now they'll be able to deploy them anywhere is, part of what you said. That's their prerogative. If they want to, they can deploy them anywhere. And they're also tied in. We talk about like the floating. They want to have ships out of the ocean with reactors that can come up to shore and give power. I mean, what could go wrong there in a climate change environment with rising sea levels and increased storms? I mean, I could have made this a 8-week course, honestly, because I also, I mean, like, I have this image I made where, like they'll power anything with nuclear. It's a cult. It's an obsession because they accuse activists as being irrational and emotional, which is ridiculous. But because guess what? I can be rational and pissed at the same time. But they're the ones who are emotional. It's like they get, it's like their God-given right to be able to have nuclear power. I mean,
but what you, if I can interrupt, what you add and what Helen Caldicott added and still adds is the emotions. This isn't some cut and dried scientific discussion. This is our life and the life on Earth. And if I can just make one further comment, I did put in the chat a link to an article I wrote about, it's all about the bomb. And I will note that we have almost the same number. The US has the most reactors of any country in the world operating. And we have almost the exact same number operating on land as civilian nuclear power as we have operating at sea in the nuclear navy. So civilian nuclear power basically doubles the market size. And so I look at it as a subsidy. The Atlantic Council calculates that subsidy being valued at $42.4 billion. And Ernie Moniz says that civilian nuclear power is, and I quote, an essential enabler for national security.
Well, think about Palantir is a military company, right? So is OpenAI. Those are military companies, and they're getting into the nuclear business. And it isn't to give us power on a grid to power our lives. It's to power the military. It's all applications for the military, I think. But I did want to say, if God wanted us to have nuclear power, she would have put a nuclear fusion in the sky called a star. And guess what she did? So, that's the only nuclear power we need is stellar star power. But for some reason, folks are obsessed with digging up rocks and trying to burn them to explode them or boil water. It's crazy.
Thank you. Our next questioner is Jake. So Jake, if you can unmute yourself and ask your question, please. I don't know if Jake heard me. I'll tell you what, he did.
Okay. Hi, here we are. Thank you. Thank you for your talk. Could you give me your name again? Because I missed it at the beginning.
You can get that from me, Jake.
Okay, thanks.
We can talk later.
But anyway, I'm glad you spoke about thank you for your talk, and I'm glad you spoke about artificial intelligence. Could you comment about the economics of artificial intelligence? By that I mean, I heard a talk the other day by I can't remember her name. She's a progressive woman who's running for Congress from what state and district I don't remember. But someone asked her about the issue of artificial intelligence, and her response was, the data centers take such a huge capital investment to build and to build and run and maintain and so forth, and such a huge amount of water and electricity and so forth, and they'll never get the money back from them. And so it's really, in other words, it's really a prescription for bankruptcy. But you're saying something else, that the military is going to be using this. So plus, if you're using artificial intelligence to run nuclear power plants, it means that half of the power plant, at least half of electricity that's being generated by the power plant going back to the data centers. You hear what I'm saying? So can you comment on the economics of it?
I'm not really. Thanks for your question, and thanks for being here. I don't really know too much about the economics. I just know that these mega billionaires and trillionaire, they got money to burn. So, you think about what was the return of Elon's investment in Trump campaign has been what? He invested, I don't know, but it's a huge return. So whatever they invest in this technology to deploy it, their expectation is that the return is, I think, the fascist control of the country, if not the world. So what's that worth?
Yeah.
So, I mean, in a way, people say SMRs will never be deployed because it's not economically feasible. That argument collapses when you think about these such rich individuals who have money to burn and resources to burn, because it's not being used to connect to the grid to power, homes or businesses. It's for their businesses, which is AI data centers.
Yeah,
but maybe someone else in the house knows about the economics more. It's just not my area.
Yeah, just to follow up quickly. They said the same thing in the 1920s until the stock market crashed in 1929. So things have changed very quickly, is all I'm saying.
I hope so.
Thanks for your question.
There are a lot of economists who think that we're on the brink of another economic collapse.
Yeah, well, thanks for your comments and questions, Jake. And now we're going to call on David Kraft, and after him, Peter Barris. And then I would like to have Joan Seaman tell us her comment, which she put in the chat, but maybe you'd like to just talk to us a little bit, Joan. And then Tom Clements also has a something to say. So if you don't mind being called on, I'll call on you after Peter Barris. David, you go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Jan. There are actually two trains of thought going in different directions, so I'll just pick one now and I'll double back when everyone is finished. The first one is a political one, and I don't hear enough, certainly in our movement and elsewhere, about using the current election cycle in any kind of a constructive way to throw roadblocks into this effort for stopping the nuclear juggernaut. So more generally, I'd like to get your reaction to if you think that's feasible or not, but specifically, how's your Hawaii delegation on nuclear, and are there any champions there that we could take a look at? So two parts to that.
Okay, thank you. Well, Maisie Hirano has never met a military project she didn't love. So that's our bacon. You know, we got two industries in Hawaii, military and tourism, and we won't legalize marijuana. That could, you know, make it a lot of money for people here, but they won't legalize it. Everyone's surprised like that weed's not legal here. So no, and Brian Schatz, and those are our senators, Schatz and Hirano, they voted for the Advance Act. They voted to support Israel in their, you know, genocidal siege on Gaza and Lebanon. So they're hawks, they're military hawks. In this, where we live, Hawaii has more military per square foot than any other state, you know, so it's like 1/3 of all of Hawaii is military. And we only have 2 Congress people. That's what's weird, right? So our Congress people are also pretty conservative and hawkish. Jill Takuda is my congressperson, and we have all our leases coming up like in 2030. So Pohakaloa is this giant army base. In fact, yesterday started RIMPAC. It's the military where they have 51 countries coming to bomb Hawaii, and they blow up ships in the ocean, and they're going to be coming in and over my house soon. And so it's like this month-long military exercise. So there's so much going on in Hawaii militarily that I don't think they can afford to be peace people, unfortunately. So yeah, there's not much support here. But Jill Takuda is, you know, coming out because these leases, they lease to the military all of these lands for $1 for 50 years. $1 for, not per year, but for all the time. And they're coming up. And, you know, so the Trump administration is saying, well, if the state doesn't allow us to renew our leases, then we're just going to take it, right, by eminent domain. So I know, right? So she got in the NDA an amendment that said you can't take it by eminent domain, but that, you know, who knows what the Senate's going to do for that. But I think they would take it if they wanted to. So they're not real allies, I would say, unfortunately.
And more generally, do you see any opportunity with the election cycle nationally to raise this issue?
I would ask Jackie Cabasso that. Okay, so I think local, talking about the awesome Jackie Cabasso who's here, with Mayors for Peace. So how did Hawaii Island become a nuclear-free zone? Because the county council did it. So that's the same thing that's happening with the AI data centers. We got to go local. So yes, I think it does matter for the election cycle, but I think it's county level and state level. So, because if we're going to allow these protections against nuclear, the bans that are in like we have a constitutional amendment against nuclear power, to overthrow that is a state, level thing. Even in New Mexico, they were trying to, I don't know if you all remember, like just a few months ago, my brain's completely full of this, so I get confused. But just recently in New Mexico, they were trying to bring nuclear as being renewable. So it could be part of the, trying to reach zero emissions, some climate programs they have. So if you can make nuclear a renewable, which is insane, that failed. So that's good. So, that's why I say, like, think galactic, act local. That's my motto, TM. That's my trademark. No, I didn't trademark it, but think galactic, act local, because at the local level, we have a chance because you can talk to those people. But I think at the national level, I mean, until we get 25 million or 100 million people in the street, and still until we start acting like Albania, there's not that much we can do. So, make your town nuclear free. Talk to the mayors for peace. I mean, that's huge. So we can be an example to the other islands. So I don't know if y'all know this, in Hawaii, every island's its own county. Maui has a couple islands in its county, but Big Island is big, so we have the county, and so our county is nuclear free now.
Do we all know that in Albania they shut down the capital? People just came out into the streets. I cannot think of what they were protesting, but there were so many of them that they could not carry on business.
There was the Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump.
Oh yeah,
they want to build a big resort on
Savon Island. On Savon Island. That was really. I mean, they closed the place down. Okay, I'm going to call on Peter Barris, and then I won't call on. I'll just call on Joan Seaman and Tom Clemens. If you don't want to say anything, it's okay, because your comments are in the chat. But I really would like to have you tell people, kind of summarize for us. But anyway, Peter, you're next. Please ask your question.
Bad news first. The thing that keeps me anchored in all this is that all these AI things that are now driving all this data center stuff, which requires all this power, were all tested in Gaza and continue to be used to target people. They can find an individual and take their apartment out of an apartment building. This is the basis of all this stuff. Okay, the more lighthearted stuff. You mentioned New Mexico. In Socorro, they were going to build something called Green Data, was going to build the biggest data center ever on land that has had 40 years of supposedly depleted uranium shot into it, which means that 70% of the impact of the materials that impacted the projectiles becomes radioactive dust. So then you go and you dig it up in a nice windy day. So this is to say local works, because that was stopped. It was stopped because people like Damasio Lopez went to the Board of Regents to make comments and stood up and said, this is going to poison everybody. And, it poisoned his parents. So local really does work. It's our best hope. That's enough out of me. Thank you so much.
I want to thank you and what Veterans for Peace do. If you all don't know, this is part of a group within Veterans for Peace working on depleted uranium weapons. So depleted uranium isn't depleted.
There's a great song by that name.
There's a great song about that. I was going to, but I didn't have time.
Who wrote it?
But I wrote it for you guys, but for Damasio. But so that's a misnomer again. Just calling it depleted uranium. Well, it's depleted of U-235 isotope, not U-238. It's still very dangerous, and it's a nuclear weapon, and it needs to be classified as that.
That's why we changed the name of our working group from the DU working group to uranium weapons.
Right on.
And, the deeper you get into this, the worse it looks. But we have now produced a mobile community mass spectrometry lab that can tell the community from the samples that they bring, now in Canyon City, I think, or Church Rock, maybe, can tell you what isotopes, how much of them, and where they came from, like which bomb tests they came from. And it's captained by Michael Ketterer, a professor emerita at Northern Arizona. And so check that out, find out about it, and send it money.
Cool. Hey, Jackie's got her hand up, and so does Michelle. Sorry, I'm jumping in here. You go ahead, Jan.
Oh, well, this is kind of a loose organization. If Michelle and David will forgive us, I will call on Jackie because Lynda mentioned her name. Jackie, Jackie, go ahead and
Okay, thank you. A couple of things I want to just bring to your attention. One is that I, I'm the executive director of Western States Legal Foundation in Oakland, which is a member of the International Association of Lawyers Against Nuclear Arms. I'm also serving as the North American coordinator for Mayors for Peace. So I just want to let you know that Mayors for Peace, U.S. members of Mayors for Peace submitted a resolution to the United States Conference of Mayors, which was adopted at their annual meeting June 7th in Long Beach, California, urging the United States to lead a global effort to halt and reverse the nuclear arms race. The U.S. Conference of Mayors is the official nonpartisan association of U.S. cities with populations over 1,500. And there are about, over 30,000, and there are about 1,500 of those cities. And so these resolutions become the basis for the policy lobbying by the U.S. Conference of Mayors. I think that's, somewhat significant. I want to mention in particular that, as this conference notes, cities are not only administrative entities, but democratic communities capable of protecting freedom, solidarity, and the rule of law when these values come under pressure. So I think that the role of cities is becoming more important now than ever before in the face of the failures of national governments. The other thing I wanted to mention is that there's another public comment period that is open until July 16th regarding the proposal for the United States to begin producing new plutonium pits. Those are the triggers or cores of nuclear weapons. And the proposal is to produce them at the Los Alamos Nuclear Weapons Laboratory and the Savannah River site. And I will put some information in the chat about how people can comment on that. The comments are open until July 16th. And as Lynda has said, these comments, they're not going to change the federal government's views, but they are an opportunity for citizens and organizations to weigh in support of opposition and also to make a record in case there is litigation that follows on. So thank you. And thank you, Lynda. That was fantastic.
I'm gonna have Jackie on my Nuke Puke show. Potentially. I just
so
want
now we know. Oh,
I
go
just want to
ahead.
add, I'm sorry I didn't include that. The pit production, because that is an open comment period and is really important.
Right.
And what's interesting, I think, too, is that they're scheduling this giveaway of plutonium pits to these private companies at a valuation of hundreds of millions of dollars, and then they're going to so it's just like what I forget his name said, it's like keeping the business going by this plutonium giveaway. I mean, it's outrageous.
Absolutely outrageous.
Yeah.
So now we know how Lynda got her legal education and interest, and she makes comments on this when she makes comments. Okay. David, you've already been called on, but I know you had a two-part question, and
I'll
you only
defer
got.
to Michelle and Dan. They can go first.
Okay, but what about Joan and Tom? Joan Seaman, are you interested in giving us a word or two about what you put in the chat?
Well, I didn't have any experience really understanding how the military is very involved, and so involved because of the Pueblo Army Depot. They're building a huge data center. The data center situation in Colorado, there are no rules yet. And so we have all these communities that want the doggone data centers, and they Denver had 500 in a location in Denver without her telling the community it was coming. I won't go into all of that, but at this point, Colorado has no legislation to protect the community because these doggone city councils and planning commissions and you name it, they are looking for the bucks. It's tax revenue, and that's just, and jobs. Oh, jobs. There aren't that many jobs. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say was there's so much going on out there, but the military just started blowing my mind. Now, remember, I was close to Rocky Flats, founded in my backyard. My God. Then we've got Ohio that has, ports situation, and we don't know totally what's going on there, or the transactions that are going on internationally. We haven't talked about how many data centers are we working with internationally. So anyway, the shock here in Colorado is this game of data centers. And we already have our special nuclear power plant that failed in Colorado, and it is overseen by the Department of Energy. That's not the norm. It's Harvard, the one in Hanford, the one in Savannah River, and Rocky, and this wonderful site in Colorado. Again, the government is overseeing it, not the state. So anyway, thank you guys so much. I want to hear from Michelle and Dan, and so thank you, Lynda, so much. God, what a mind-blowing event today.
Thank you very much, Joan. That was worth my calling on you. And Tom, you're usually quite quiet. Could you just say a word or two?
Oh gosh, I don't. This whole thing is so damn depressing. But the main thing to me is, I mean, it's like a neutron bomb has been dropped on everything. We're down to the bedrock with a lot of these. So my main concern, and I appreciate what Lynda has outlined in her presentation, everything they're doing needs to be documented. And I don't know who is doing that. What you just presented was about the best compilation. People are so scattered. I mean, if you look at the Federal Register or DOE regulations, it is every day. They have a plan. I don't know who's in charge of it, but they're implementing their plan where they pull the trigger on something every day. I don't know if we're going to get through this. I think a lot of it is just a smokescreen to make people think that stuff is happening while they steal the money. But I don't know who is documenting it beyond what Lynda just presented so that we can try to recreate something from all the ruins here at the end of a few years. So I just wish people would keep their antennas up, as Lynda is doing, to try to write down everything they're doing. It's a full-time job, though. And I don't know who's doing it. I'm not doing it. I see it. But Lynda, keep at it, because we need somebody to recreate what has been destroyed if we ever get to that point. Anyway, thank you very much.
Well, Tom, I appreciate you so much because we chit chat all the time about stuff. Usually I'm swearing a lot, but yeah, it was difficult recreating that. I'll try to like publish something with kind of like everything, and honestly, I have a reference list I can send out. I made a reference list with every slide and all the documents connected to it with the URL. So it's about 150 references for this talk. So I can send that out. One thing that I didn't talk about was, how they're doing so much in secrecy as well, because when you look at the draft EIS for the Paducah laser enrichment plant that they're building, that they're proposing, it's all redacted. it looks like an Epstein file. I mean, it's all like redacted. So the safety plan is redacted. It's all proprietary. So they're starting to do a lot more of that, like having it in total secrecy. So you can't even document what's happening because it's all secretive. But I think they're trying to just, like someone said, I think it was Anne, is chaos, corruption, just hit us over the head so we can't keep up. And they can do as much as they can before, while they can, is I think the goal. I think Chris Wright is one of the architects of all this, along with, I don't know, other demons.
Well, that's part of it. We don't know who's doing this. I mean, we don't know the individuals. They've got teams of people that every day, what are we going to do 2 weeks from now or 5 months from now? And they implement on some schedule. And I don't know how to find out and expose that. And the media has been so obliterated, but those zombies in there have to be exposed. And maybe Chris Wright is a leader of them.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, who knows?
Well, Joan mentioned Ohio, and Lee Blackburn is here, but he hasn't got his hand raised, and it is now like 14 minutes until 10 o'clock Eastern time. I don't know about other people, but anyway, I'm going to call on Michelle, and then Dan, and then David, and then maybe Lee can say something about Ohio. But Michelle, you go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be real quick. So sort of responding to the political question, I think I was convinced by a webinar or meeting earlier today. I put info in the chat that probably the most important thing to put comments in, and the quality is not particularly relevant, the quantity is on the change in the health and radiation standards, because everything that's sort of the pivotal point on which every single thing rests, including safety and cleanup of nuclear waste sites and security, ability to dump quote unquote low level waste into the regular waste streams. It just sort of everything rests on that. Again, quantity, not quality. And so I put some stuff in the chat for like info there. And again, the NRC regulations on that in response to the executive order on radiation protection is anticipated to come out in early July. So that's point one. Point two, the other question from a political point of view, what is, or say part B, is you have to really know your audience. And I think a key thing for us in a political season is to be agile and to be able to bring as many different topics into this as it can. And from my perspective, like everything relates to nuclear, which is why I don't have friends anymore, except among you all. But for instance, the military, right? Oh, we need it for the military. We need it for AI. Well, people are objecting to that. And with respect to the military, even if you're a hawk, right now we're in, again, military hat, pretty desperate straits because of all the munitions we dumped and wasted and just, blew everything up. So there's now essentially, for just to sort of get us back to where we were before we did everything, they're basically saying we need over $1 trillion for that. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's just regular missiles and just sort of the stuff that's being actually used in military conflicts, drones and so forth. People aren't really detonating nuclear weapons, although the submarines, nuclear submarines are a different question. But so, we don't have money. We have money, billions and billions of dollars of public money we can spend on nuclear power plants and AI data centers. But that goes to people who are richer than God. And we don't have money for healthcare. We don't have money for affordable housing. We don't have money to build up our infrastructure. Sort of hook things into the big political memes that are in, where it's relevant and where it works. So yeah, okay.
One thing I've been doing, because I'm a troll, so when people say are protesting and resisting AI data centers, I say well, you think that's bad, and it is. Wait till you have a life cycle campus. Because not only are you going to have the AI data centers, you're going to have the nuclear reactors and the spent fuel that's going to consume enormous amounts of water and electricity. So, and I actually think AI data centers is one of the greatest things to happen in nuclear activism, as long as they don't get built, because they are so connected. And people, for some reason, they get the AI data center, they don't get the nuclear power plant as much because the propaganda is so extreme. But yeah, I have to I just want to add, I went to a meeting the other day organized by some Diné Navajo folks getting ready for submitting comments and requesting hearings about new permits for new uranium mines. And I got so inspired because this is a bit of a silver group here today. And for myself personally, I offer my services of, I'll do analysis for you, I'll explain the physics to all these indigenous groups, because they tend to be younger and they're so passionate, and that's what I do here in Hawaii, and then offer those services. So I really think that to have that next generation of young people carrying on and resisting, that is something we really have to think about as elders. Who's going to carry this on? Maybe it's not so bad in the nuclear weapons world, Jackie, because you have ICANN people are pretty young. Yeah, but nuclear power, I mean, come on, this is pretty, look at us. We're all fabulous elders.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm from Utah, and those life cycle campuses, that one they're planning in Tooele County, it's 30 miles from Salt Lake. So, and the first thing they have to do is say, okay, we agree to be a storage place for spent fuel. That's the very first requirement. Yeah. Anyhow, we're going back to Dan Solitz, and it is 8 minutes to the hour. Dan, you go ahead, please. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, all. I've been involved for quite a while in the Hanford cleanup as a member of the Hanford Advisory Board. And I've also been watching what's going on in the rest of the legacy waste sites. And I'm wondering, Lynda, what would it take to make a deep geologic repository acceptable to you? This place, this stuff has to go. This stuff has to go someplace. They're double stacking their high-level vitrified glass at Savannah River now. They've been so productive, and they're not able to get it off-site. In a few years, we'll be making high-level glass, and it needs to be moved off-site. We do have the other high-level waste that needs to go somewhere. It can't stay next to the Columbia. So what would it take to have an acceptable site for this stuff? And also, would not commingling legacy waste with current commercial nuclear power waste, would that make it more acceptable? Would that make it more acceptable to have a site for deep geological disposal just for legacy waste?
If you're asking me, I can't tell. I don't want it in my backyard, so I can't tell anybody to put it in their backyard. So,
well, how about your children's backyard? It's got to go
my
somewhere.
Children, I know
it'll either be above ground or it'll be below ground.
I'm telling you, I don't know how to solve that problem. I mean, I guess it's like you get I actually did some, I made some images, and I should have had them, but it's just too much of what that would look like. These, containers left on site that have to last for, hundreds of thousands of years. I mean, maybe Jackie or other people have some better idea about it.
Switzerland, Korea, Japan, all these countries have plans in place to do this.
Yeah,
and
but
we've got nothing.
Well,
Finland's doing it, and
for
we've got
me,
nothing.
Dan, I'm putting my emphasis on not making more. Okay.
Yeah.
So once we stop not making more, then we got to deal with how to clean up the mess. And unfortunately, young people are going into professions as nuclear engineers to make more waste. We need young people to go into the profession of nuclear engineer to clean the mess up. So, I mean,
Do you
like,
really think that if we stop nuclear production, commercial or nuclear production, weapons production, if we stop all of that right now, do you really think that our next step will be to get rid of the waste, or will we just forget about it and leave it to whoever lives next to it to deal with it?
well, I'm going to be optimistic today. So I'm a skeptical optimist, and I'm agnostic about, I need to learn more about, because you're right, Dan, I think we need to vision, VISION, what the future should look like. And I'm so busy trying to stop more, waste and chaos that I can't even catch my breath to think about what that looks like, the long-term storage. So,
yeah, I just got a Father's Day card from my granddaughter, and she thanked me for 1 million gallons of radioactive waste that I've willed to her that's on the Hanford site. I've given that much to her so she can take care of it.
Well,
good luck to her.
It's a good question, Dan. I mean, that's a really good question.
Well, I hope everybody thinks about it, because it's got to go somewhere, and it'd be nice to do it before my granddaughter starts to pour a bottle of scotch over my grave after she rinses her kidneys with it.
Mm. Okay. Janet Greenwald, would you please ask your question?
I don't really have a question. I wanted to say, address the last speaker, and that is that in Finland, they are completing a underground repository for high-level waste. It's on an island in granite, and the way down to the waste goes like this. It's quite well done. It cost a whole lot of money.
I bet. Well, the other thing too, just in a way, I don't want there to be one, because then that normalizes having the waste if we have a place to put it, right? So it's kind of a psychological deterrent, is that we don't have a place to put it, and we don't want to normalize it because there is nowhere to put it. And I'm really curious what Jackie has to say.
Well, Jackie's already spoken and Laura Feldman hasn't.
Because I asked her specifically to answer this question since she
Yeah, okay. All right, Jackie, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think there's a bigger question overarching all of these questions, which is there's a kind of an assumption in the mainstream and perhaps some of us that endless economic growth and endless growth is the only alternative. And that is what has to be questioned. We cannot have endless growth. And we have to stop producing more nuclear waste, because there is no way at present to store or sequester or dispose of nuclear waste. And so it's a very huge societal question, but I'm looking at this in terms of AI, I'm looking at it in terms of the economies, and so on. It's like, hello, let's get a grip. We got to question this. We cannot have endless economic growth without catastrophic consequences on humanity. So that's what I wanted to say. It has to stop. We cannot keep producing more nuclear waste until, and there never will be, but let's say there might be a way to dispose of the waste. And this is a huge, huge question.
It's a huge moral question.
Yeah.
Lynda, do you want to make a comment on that?
Yeah. I was going to swear. But yeah, capitalism, it's, this growth, the Earth can't sustain it. There is no planet B. This is the spaceship we have. We're orbiting a star that's orbiting a galaxy that's moving through the cosmos. That's where we are. And we have to think galactically and realize that our life support system is the biosphere. And as we keep polluting it, it's like planet Petri dish. we cannot sustain it. It's not sustainable. So is this the inevitability that we kill ourselves in some suicidal because we're over consuming, that we can't sustain that growth, so that a few people can hoard wealth because they're mentally sick. That's an illness. That level of hoarding of wealth is I'm not a psychologist, but I'm going to tell you, they are flipping sick people that need that much. So yeah, it's absolutely like the moral question, the ethics of what we're talking about is critical to our arguments, I think, in trying to make this, I mean, just think about how Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, is demonizing empathy, right? He's like demonizing empathy. If we all have empathy, we're going to kill ourselves. It's like insane. We're living in the, that 1984 doublespeak world of peace is war and war is peace. And, so yeah. Thanks, Jackie.
Yeah. Laura, please unmute.
Yes, thank you so
Thank you.
much. This was wonderful, Lynda. I too was at the webinar this morning, Better Protection. And after this, I think I'm just going to go walk somewhere and cry for a while. But what I wanted to suggest about waste, I'm a big fan of Joanna Macy, and she's a very well-known deep ecology activist scholar, and she wrote a book about nuclear activism, and she's just amazing. And she put forth the Nuclear Guardianship Project, which was you don't bury it, you don't ship it to someone else, you don't forget about it, you don't send it into space, you don't put it on the water, you keep your waste. It's like musical chairs. We're here at Hanford, Dan. And so what we need to do is contain it, make sure it's contained, and we take care of it. We steward that waste generationally until we figure out what to do with it. And I know that no one likes to hear that, but I don't know what the solution is. Just recently, the Northwest Pacific Rim states voted to send waste from Canada to Utah. I mean, that is just so crazy. And transportation, as we know, is dangerous. So look up Joanna Macy and the Nuclear Guardianship Project. As I say, it's not pretty, but it's real. I live on a Superfund site in Portland, Oregon, and there's so much struggle over where that waste is going to go. It's expensive, it's dangerous. We need to contain our waste, steward it until we know what to do with it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. And
In a million years, that Columbia River is going to shift so that waste can't stay there.
Yeah, that's
well,
true.
we better figure it out before then, because shipping it somewhere else isn't going to work either.
I mean, Estonia is sending their waste to the US. I don't know if you know that. And then Japan sends its waste to UK. So there's waste on the ocean, as we speak, being ported around. And then you think about the deployment of these microreactors. If they're putting them out in the battlefield, they're going to be on ships as well. So that's the worst. The ocean is so precious. Without it, the biosphere suffers. All life. I mean, I love humans, but come on, like none of the other animals in the biosphere deserve this. So yeah, it's a big question. And thank you for that reference. I'm going to check her out.
There's an awfully good video about the destruction of Trojan there in Portland. And Catherine Chitty is here. She probably could put in the chat a reference to that video. It's really interesting. And then Estonia sent its waste to Utah, to the
oh yeah,
the White Mesa Mill. And anyway, and then the Manhattan Project is going to Wade County in Michigan, blah, blah, blah. Anyhow, where are we with the list? I'm thinking that it is getting really late. It's already after the hour by 4 minutes. But I know David had a two-part question, and he really should get his second part in, or two-part comment.
Okay, well, thanks. It actually is an offshoot of some of the comments that were made earlier. Alfred Meyer brought up the issue of thanking you for bringing the emotion back to this issue. So much of what we do and what we encounter is put into the bullshit context of rads, rems, millisieverts and all kinds of techno geek language, which really removes the humanity as much as possible. But I share Tom Clement's overwhelm tremendously. But Lynda, a few minutes ago, you hit the magic word for me that I wanted to bring up, and that is the fact that what we are dealing with, and I think the terms we have to start speaking about nuclear, both weapons and nuclear power, is in terms of the psychopathology of it. Because then it puts it on our terminology. It puts us in our ballpark. And I raise this as I did mental health work previously, where I actually used one of the clinical definitions for addiction to show that we were energy addicts, not just metaphorically, but actually. And then most recently, if you look up the clinical definition for fetish, you will see that it matches nuclear perfectly. Now, I know that psychopathology and stupidity seem to be prerequisites for public office these days, but I'd like to see us really start attacking this issue from a clinical health issue, that this is really sick behavior. You mentioned the billionaires. They are nothing more than hoarders. They are clinically hoarding stuff that they don't need and taking it away from everybody else. This is sick behavior. And I think we need to start harping on that aspect of nuclear specifically, but more generally where we were a minute ago about the idea of consumerism and the fact that unlimited growth is just impossible. So I'd like your reaction on that. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, my emotion, so my training as a physicist makes me compartmentalize. And actually, I traditionally have not been real emotional, but now that I'm older and wiser, I'm just angry. And I think that's appropriate. So the other show I'm going to start doing is called Physics Bitch. And that's the show you're going to be on, Jackie, is Physics Bitch. So, and they'll merge. Physics Bitch will be puking about nukes. But I think I'm probably going to move away from doing straight up analysis because it's really hard to hold. And, and I'm older and it's exhausting, right? And I don't even know how Jackie and all y'all who do this all the time. I'm not doing this all the time. This is new. All this stuff I've just done in the last 8 months, as far as NRC and DOE. But yeah, I think we need to get mad. I think we, need to analyze these people. Why would anyone in the world have the capacity to murder all life on Earth multiple times over and over again? That is clinically insane. There is no other analysis possible. Like to think that mutually assured destruction is going to keep us from using nuclear weapons. I mean, in a way, I don't know, this is a whole nother conversation. You should invite a psychologist or something, but seriously, it's absolute insanity. And sometimes I just think this is how humans are going to go out. But what makes me sad about that is that they're going to take everybody out with them. And I love birds and fish and animals, and they don't deserve this. So I don't know if we deserve it. I don't think we do, but honestly, it's not fair to murder the planet. I have this new song. You're going to see, I'm going to change, you guys, and just become a radical, angry bitch. And that's before I die. And I actually, there's a great scene that in Terminator where Sarah's sitting on that she just shot the guy and she's smoking a cigarette and she's like, men like you built the hydrogen bomb. Men like you thought it up. And men like you would murder the planet instead of losing control. And it's the guy who kills his kids and shoots himself because no one gonna get her but me. You know what I mean? So, that's what we're dealing with. Men who would not y'all here, but men who would gladly murder the planet instead of lose control. In fact, they talk about that. I'd rather have a nuclear war than become communist. It's psychotic. So as far as I'm really hungry right now. So I'm kind of spacing out a little bit, but it's dinner time for me.
Does anybody remember Better Red Than Dead? Better dead than red. No, what better dead than I got that backwards.
They say that. I'd rather have a nuclear war than be a communist. Are you crazy? Thanks.
Yeah, I think that Lynda has called an end. She wants to eat something, and she's been here now for well, she came in at 6:30, and it's now 9 o'clock. It's almost 3 hours. So I think we need to thank Lynda, and I'm turning this back over to Dave. And Jake, I'm sorry, but I have to talk to you on the phone, and we'll talk later. So I'm turning it back over to Dave to close out.
They're done.
What's that? You're done? Oh, you want to watch something?
That was pretty amazing. Thank you so much for your presentation tonight and your endurance, as a matter of fact, as well.
And military.
So a couple of quickie announcements, and then we'll break for the night here. Let's see if we can get this thing to work. There we go. Our next two Night with the Experts, they're always the last Thursday of each month. The next one is July 30th. There are 5 Thursdays in July, but that's just before the Hiroshima-Nagasaki anniversaries. So there's a chance that we'll have something relating to that on that one. We haven't booked it yet. August 27th will be the event in August. And at the moment, we are working to actually get some Japanese guests for that one. So we'll keep you posted, and we invite you to come back for that. And as you can see, if you really like what we're doing here, feel free to join us in some manner. I also mentioned as we started the meeting tonight that this Sunday is the NEIS annual meeting, and those of you who are members are welcome to join. And if you're not a member, go to our website and become one. If you like programs like this, we intend to keep it going as long as we can. Now tonight, when things are done, Lynda, you will send me the PowerPoint, and I will be sending out the chat and the PowerPoint to everyone who attended this evening. This event is recorded, and we will get the recordings up probably within the next couple of days on the NEIS YouTube page. So you can watch for it there if you want to sit through it again. But make sure you have food and drink with you when you start it next time. So on that note, I want to thank you again, Lynda, for a terrific presentation tonight. I want to thank the rest of you for joining us and your endurance and your dedication for all these hundreds of years of work that we've all put into trying to make the world a little bit less nuclear. So again, we thank you, and we wish you a good night. Come again. Next time, bring a friend, though. It's a prerequisite.
I'm staying for a minute, right, David and Jan?